I'm here with Jesper Andersen. He is the CEO and president over at Infoblox. They're a California-based network security firm. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Thanks for being with us today.
Okay.
So he's going to talk about DNS security and some emerging attacks. First, can you talk about DNS attacks as opposed to DDoS? You know, how much more of them we're seeing now?
Yeah, so I think distributed denial of service attacks is the one that's getting the most press. There are a number of services that can be used to prevent those kind of things for enterprises out there. But there's a whole range of DNS attacks that are happening beyond DDoS attacks. Some have to do with taking over companies' DNS servers and sort of altering and changing some of the setup around the domain names and the mappings. One is referred to as cache poisoning, where bad guys are going in and they're taking over and remapping some of the services. There are a set of services around DNS, a set of protocols that often are offered by a service like that, like TCP/IP, like FTP and other protocols. And the cyber hackers and attackers out there are going in and doing everything they can to take over a DNS server. If they do that, of course, and if they can change the actual settings on a DNS server, they can redirect traffic to a spoofed server, and that may eventually end up capturing information from customers, such as credit card information, which of course would be very bad.
And do you, like with DDoS, do you sometimes see DNS attacks being used to, get the attention or take the attention away from other, IT services as a distraction, for instance, or if it's a more advanced attack?
Yeah, I mean, we do see threats where cyber terrorists are doing multiple things to attack any given company to sort of keep the company busy and to not maybe see the actual intent of some APT that's happening inside the organization.
So how about, methods for mitigating these attacks for any organization?
Yeah, I think there are a number of things you can do. There are perimeter defenses, as you know, that companies are implementing. There are various APT systems that you can use. There's intrusion detection and prevention systems. We've been focused on a category of products that sort of allow companies to, one, secure the DNS server for your external presence. And then internally, as you're going through an internal DNS server, if you imagine that you could, via subscription, load in threat intelligence, you'd actually be in a position to see malware trying to communicate to command centers outside. And that's a particularly nasty and sophisticated emerging type of threat around DNS.
And why is, DNS firewalls, or why is setting those up important, in comparison to how traffic normally would flow through?
Because DNS servers, especially on the internal side, sit on almost all traffic. Whenever anyone is making any communication via HTTP out of the enterprise you're in, it's got to go through the DNS server. And the way most organizations are set up, firewalls are configured to allow DNS queries to pass through what's called port 53 and just pass through that. So the bad guys have found out that that's actually a path that they can choose where they might not be prevented at a natural perimeter firewall. So they're getting very sophisticated in setting up DNS tunneling techniques, and having a DNS firewall from a vendor that's good at building those kind of things can be an advantage for big enterprises.
And can you describe DNS tunneling? Is that an emerging one that people should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, so different ways of creating tunnels, which basically sort of is a hidden or scrambled, encoded, if you like, technique of going out sort of through some kind of a protocol. So think of it as stealing assets from someone's network, then packaging them up in DNS headers, encoding them, then sending DNS queries and having the bad guy on the other side stripping those headers off and sort of decoding them and repackaging the content that was stolen. That's what's happening today via some of these techniques, and obviously companies need to sort of protect themselves from those kind of techniques.
Got it. Thank you so much for describing that. Again, you just heard from Jesper Andersen. He is the CEO over at Infoblox. Make sure you tune in next time at scmagazine.com.